when you look at Bitcoin, it started off as a system for payments. The initial white paper that came out at the time said, this is a new peer-to-peer system which we can transfer money around the world very quickly. The problem right now for Bitcoin is transaction times are incredibly high. There's a lot of people questioning whether this has long-term sustainability. Is it actually a currency? And these are some of the questions that Bitcoin has to answer, the development community has to answer as well. And that's why I think we've seen a lot of interest in some of these other cryptocurrencies, the likes of Ether, the likes of Litecoin, which offer different use cases. And that is why some of the investors are looking at some of these cryptocurrencies and going, hey, I think actually long-term, perhaps the likes of Ethereum or Litecoin or Ripple could offer more long-term value as they actually get used in real-world use cases.
I've been bothering you about this a lot the last week or two, trying to understand these things a little better. So you talk about the uses there.
Yeah.
How do you go about valuing these cryptocurrencies?
So what's interesting is you can start to look at it. If we look at Bitcoin, we could say, well, X amount of transactions are done in Bitcoin, and that could give you a value. But the problem is right now with Bitcoin, it's very hard to tell how many transactions are happening in Bitcoin. There's not a lot of retailers accepting this, apart from in Japan. Japan's an exception here. But when you look at something like an Ether, now, for those who aren't aware of Ethereum and Ripple, for example, is used by banks to transfer money from different currencies to another across the world in a matter of seconds. Now, this is a process that takes usually 3 to 5 days. Now, if we start to say, well, look, banks are trade finance, banks are transferring X amount of money between each other, this amount per year, and actually now Ripple's starting to account for about 5% of that. Just say that happened at some point in the future, you could begin to value the Ripple token. Same with Ethereum. Ethereum's designed as a blockchain system for many different use cases across financial institutions, insurance, a bunch of different industries. And again, if we start to say, well, these are companies that are starting to use Ethereum for this amount of trade or this amount of processing of money, then again, you can start to value the Ether token. That, of course, is maybe a few years off yet. But at the moment, it's very difficult. And the other danger is, well, a brand new coin could just pop up and really disrupt the entire market and be something that is much better than the existing product. So that's another danger here, because this is the early stages, let's be honest. A lot of these companies are just experimenting with these technologies without any kind of idea yet of, actually, is this something we can implement, and is this something going to stick around for the next few years?
One of the things that's been quite striking, you and I have talked about before, but over the last few weeks, with that huge surge in interest in Bitcoin in particular, we've seen a real slowdown of the transactions.
Yeah.
Because seemingly exchanges are being overwhelmed. You talk there about some of the Ether products like Ripple. It's a second across the globe.
Yeah.
That distinction in terms of ease of transaction, speed of transaction, is that going to be something that's going to be something to watch over the next few months?
It definitely will. I think when you look at something like a Ripple, that is specifically designed for enterprise. However, it's not something that is pushed out as a consumer product. Bitcoin, however, was pushed out as a consumer product, a way to transfer money across the globe in a matter of seconds without fees, and that's something that.
But if it's not taking seconds, if it's taking minutes or even hours, that's a problem.
That's a big problem, yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge problem. And that's why we saw some of the big debates earlier this year. There was something that was known as a hard fork, where Bitcoin split into something known as Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold. And that's because the community around that felt that Bitcoin was just getting too slow, it was getting too efficient, and they needed something that had higher transaction volumes. And that's actually what Bitcoin Cash, for example, does. There's a new code that's essentially found a way to increase the time of a transaction using this new spin-off of Bitcoin, as it were. So there will be continued debate over this in the Bitcoin community, no doubt, but let's see what people begin to see Bitcoin as. They now begin to see it as a digital gold, a long-term store of value, rather than a currency. So that's what I think, when you look at it from an investment perspective, that's what people are going to be debating over the next few months.